going.
Oh.
There we are.
All right.
Been a minute.
There we go.
It's been a minute for sure. Yeah, it's this summer we more or less we chose to spend some time focusing on off-season competitions that were taking place. Worked with a couple of them. There were a few others that were happening in the States while I was over in Europe. Patrick's had a big couple of weeks, leaving St. Louis behind for a better part of a year and getting all the last minute stuff in Texas squared away before heading out to Germany next week. And next week, of course, is also the CrossFit Games. And, it is kind of true where you could spend the whole summer, building up anticipation and focusing on the games. But there's a lot of other stuff that's happening in the sport all the time. We like to highlight some of those other things, especially, competitions, competition organizers that put a lot of effort and work into making that possible. And now is the time to put those behind us and to focus full steam ahead on the CrossFit Games. Obviously, during this summer, I've still been paying attention to everything that's going on, thinking about the athletes that are competing and what the CrossFit Games is going to look like this year. And quite frankly, for someone who's traveling a lot and especially when you're international, it can be difficult to stay in touch with everything that's happening here. And this is actually, Mike, you'll like this. I asked a group of CrossFit Games team athletes in Norway this question. I said, if someone took your phone away from you for a month and deprived you of any information of what was going on in the CrossFit space, and you got your phone back and had the opportunity to refresh yourself on what had happened in the last month, where would you go? And although they were a little confused in their response, they basically said barbell spin and Known Knowable. Would be the two places that they would go for that.
Those are two pretty good places, I guess. Yeah.
And
I also go to the spin quite a bit, so good for them.
It's a good company.
Mm-hmm. And if you haven't been paying attention to what Mike's been putting out, he does a really good job of just kind of keeping a pulse on what's going on throughout the CrossFit community and giving you opportunities to, dive further into those things by resharing a lot of posts that athletes, competitions, coaching teams are putting out there. And then in addition to that, he has a skill set that I found out about a couple of years ago now of just kind of being able to look at what's going on in terms of the sport and put out some, I think, meaningful and I call it like, it's something that the people want. It's like when I think to myself, if I was just consuming this sport recreationally, what would I want to know? That I think that you put out a lot of those types of things, easy to access for people who don't have all day to study the athletes and the data.
Yeah, that's appreciated. Like the way I see it is, I don't know, and you could tell us about any of the events you've been to, but you found a place to like insert yourself into those events as well and like make the most of them. Like I used to go to competitions and stuff, not too many, but like I was always sort of like, well, how can I lend a hand here versus just sort of like being a consumer of it. And then that's where I found like, hey, I'm not going to beat anybody on posting an event result. I'm not going to beat anybody on like a press release or something like that. Obviously, we're all sort of getting all of that as the summer goes on, as you talked about. But like where I can lend a hand or provide assistance is more of just in data collection and sharing than it comes to like even what we're going to talk about today, like ranking athletes and really doing that. You mentioned spin. I'm a part of that media poll, and I appreciate getting able to share that in that avenue. But like I wouldn't, maybe besides maybe the Heat One app or something like that, I'm not really like putting too much stock into my rankings or hope. I have some athletes that I root for, but yeah. So with Known and Knowable, it's like that is really the piece of it. It's like even catchphrases here, like unknown and known knowable, as Greg Glassman talked about back in the day. It's really just trying to find that context that says like, okay, here's a small, easy to chew on piece that just says like, here's a run event. Well, here's the last few years of run events and what athletes did to them. Or here's some like information that's been shared with either a piece of athletes or just all athletes, but the spectators may want to know about is like, well, here's what we know about this from what CrossFit said so far, and just making that consumable that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
and the content that CrossFit puts out, it's not always in the most obvious places. Like you and I have talked about this summer, even you started following them on Twitter because they were dropping relevant information there. I don't even have a Twitter. And I think it's, I guess I can see like the strategic avenue of, well, let's put it on Twitter and that'll make more people follow us on Twitter. But they publish articles and they don't advertise that the articles are published, and they put out the lists of penalties, and there's no advertisement of the fact that those are published. So having a couple people in the space that keep tabs on that and then make that known for the people who want to look further into it, I think it's super valuable. And I think that you have carved out a nice niche for yourself. And when we were getting ready for these shows this week, we were a couple different people we were thinking about having on, and I asked Mike, and he was happy to do it, but he said he's not going to make any 1 through 40 lists. So he's more or less going to be kind of the reaction, the ask a question, the wow, I'm a little bit surprised by this. Maybe tell us why, or maybe just ask. Patrick has his own rankings that he's done. We haven't published them. We did put mine up this morning, and so it'll be fun to see. Patrick and I have had very, very little conversation, much like Bill and Chase do on Get With The Programming. They come up with their lists independently, and then the show is pretty much a raw reaction to that. My rankings are posted on B.Friendly Fitness as of this morning, 1 through 40. It's something I've been doing for several years now. This year, it is cool to see that there's other people, Clydesdale, John Young, that are willing to put out their lists 1 through 40. I always, it's always tough because obviously that means you're picking someone last, and it's like, but this is the CrossFit Games. This is the World Championship event. This is like, just to make it there. We have the famous line from Shad Woodland years and years ago. You don't know how good you have to be to suck at the CrossFit Games. And that statement is going to be extremely relevant today. It's something that I echo every time we do these shows. Look, there's 20 women that I wish I could say that they're going to make the podium, but they're not. Only 3 of them are. Only 10 are making the top 10. And any way you slice it, there's not extra spaces in those rankings. So you got to make hard decisions. And then obviously, competition is competition, and we know that there's things that can happen that will be surprising, and there's things will happen that will on a good way and on a bad way. So PC, I'm going to let you kind of steer the ship in terms of if we start at the top, start at the bottom, and how we do this.
Well, I made graphics, so
and please give the credit to the photographers. I know you do on the thing, but I don't mind calling them out here because these are some awesome pictures.
Yeah, and I did on the post. And obviously being a content creator myself, obviously, but, if you take a look, everyone from Training Day Media, this is his epic photo right here. It's been used so many times. I think he might have copyrighted this as well. But, and then, obviously Seb's, who Known Knowable, good old Mike, he's employing this year. So
my guy.
Amazing. Yeah, we've used some of his work, Rafael Paradis, as well as CrossFit LLC and some other photographers there. So, but let's go ahead and we're going to start from the bottom. We're going to do the 40 through 20. And
this is how you did it. Nice, Patrick.
Yes.
Okay.
You like this, or should?
So, before anything else, actually, I did have this one graphic I want to just share with you guys. Because I think that John talked about this at some point when he was doing his ranking show, or maybe it's his rookie show. Can you see that, Patrick? Is it on there now?
Yep.
I see it. Yep.
So this is just the last 3 years at the games and looking at the rookies, the number of rookies, their average placement. 2021, it's notable that 6 athletes withdraw or did not start or didn't travel to the competition that year. So you could add, 3 to 6 points onto that as an average. But basically the average for the rookies is trending up, meaning worse. And when you look at the athletes that have done the best at the CrossFit Games in those respective years, you have Mal O'Brien and Emma Lawson and Olivia Kerstetter last year, who, although it was the best performance from a rookie, was a lot worse than the previous 2. And then the rest of the names on the bottom there are the athletes that made the cut, the rookie athletes that made the cut. And so 4, 4, and 2 by year, with a total of 3, including Alexis Raptis there in 2022, who managed to get into the top 10. And if you just look at the credentials of the women that are doing well here, Mal got second in her semifinal that year. Lawson won it. Kerstetter was 7th at hers, which, is reflective of a worse score there. Shelby Neal kind of snuck in. And a lot of the other athletes as well. If you remember Bailey Rail back in that year, she actually didn't even qualify for the quarterfinals. She got a backfill invite, made it, and then made the cut. It was an incredible story and kind of like pokes a hole. Her case study poked a hole early on in that system. So when we're looking at the bottom of this list and you see a lot of rookies that are there, this is why. And John's rankings that I saw reflected that, and I'm sure that Patrick's will as well. And it's not a slight against the rookies, especially in the women's field. And we'll look at this again. There's just a group of about maybe 10 to 12 women this year that are really hard to beat. And I think if any rookie is going to make a play for the top 10, it's going to have to be an exceptional performance from start to finish.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead, PC.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, Brian, you said this a few times, like especially in the comments of some of your rankings posts, stuff like that. Somebody will be like, well, so-and-so should be in the top 3 or top 5 or top 10. It's like, okay, well, there's only 10 spots. Who are you going to take out of there? The math only works if you add one, you got to subtract one, right? So like, I have a similar article coming out soon that looks at that same thing. I don't have any fancy graphics. I'll share them on social media. But one thing close to this that I was looking at is since 2009, at least one rookie, man or woman, has made the top 10 of the games. So Yella Hosta was 10th last year, as you showed on there. Olivia Kerster was 16th, but go all the way back as far as you want. And I use 2009 because that's when athletes actually started to qualify versus just a clipboard or something like that. So with that said, I think that does then lead into what we're about to discuss here is, okay, well, is that trend going to continue, or is this the final year that ends where it's just, okay, the top 10 is just too good. And in the last few months, it just only got better by adding, I'm sure we'll get to the top of the list where some of these athletes fall out, but 3 of the best women in CrossFit just added themselves back to the list, including the 6-time champ. So it's hard to then say like, well, you're going to throw those 3 in. These rookies only get to then fill out the spots where they can.
Speaking of rookies, Jake Chapman. And we'll talk about Amy Kringle later on as we go through
that's
this.
A good one.
That's something that me and Brian, one of our many discrepancies here. And
I was quickly scanning for on this list. So
well, in the context of rookies who've done well in the lead up to the games, if you're looking at this season, obviously Grace Walton won the Oceania region, which would be the best. What?
She should have won the Open.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, she had a great season up to this point for sure. Yeah. And then if you're looking at the 3 bigger regions that have, the 10-ish qualifications or whatever, Hattie Canyo had the best performance, taking 4th in the West. Kringle, Gluck, and Kieschman were 5th, 6th, 7th in Europe, and they were all really close on points, like a spot here or there, no rep here or there, difference in points. And then in the East, it was, Lexi Neely, I think was the only rookie getting in. So if you're trying to find the woman who has the chance to make the top 10 or have at least make the cut, those are the names that I would probably start with.
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and start. We jump right into it. Let's break this down by cuts. So let's go 30 through 40, since that's the first big cut that's going to happen. After Saturday morning?
Correct.
Yeah. So after Chad, after 7 scored events, as far as we know. Yeah. And when you look at the events on paper, like through 7 events, it's nice to know the number that we have, and you see the 3 workouts that we've been given so far are, running specific, monostructural specific, and a run swim. Now I don't know how much that sandbag is going to weigh into the sprint carry that it looks like in the first part of that workout on Friday night. But those 3 workouts, either way, whatever they end up being, are 43% of the total points available for all athletes prior to the first cut. That's nearly half of the points available. And obviously we don't have any of the information on the other 4 scoring opportunities there. But when you think about the fact that event 8 is the clean ladder, it reduces the chance of a heavy lift in those first 7 events. And so if you are a heavy lifter, the first 7 events with what information we have now don't look great for you. I would still expect there to be something heavy-ish, but that could be a pig, it could be a sandbag, it could be something that's kind of odd object-y early on. with some of the heavier events like an Olympic lift for 1 rep max, or any kind of lift for 1 rep max, obviously the clean, and then possibly something back 9-esque late in the weekend. They do often have something that's heavy on the last day. So it's not really looking great if you're a heavy lifter that doesn't like to go long with the information that we have right now.
Yeah, and I think that really reflects in my bottom 10, I guess. But specifically with Danny Spiegel, I have her at 34th. You have her at 27th. And Lynn brought it up. PC what? And hey, again, it's like Brian said, she's not going to have that heavy lifting event where it's almost, it's a guaranteed top 3 finish. Again, Brian says there might be something heavy-ish, but I don't know. That would probably be something heavy-ish with more capacity. And I'd like, if that's the case, she might not win that, because you have a lot of women in this field, Tia, Laura, Gabby, that are really good, are better than her when it comes to capacity and cycling barbell, even a heavy barbell. But just the workouts just don't look good for her. I mean, you start off with a run swim, which obviously she's probably the worst runner, and she's not the worst swimmer, but the running is going to be the major part of that event. And I mean, that's what it looks like. And then you have a sprint. She is a good sprinter. Mm-hmm. I mean, she's shown that at Rogue. She's shown that at some other events. But then you follow that with a 1,600-meter run. That's whatever she does on the sprint. I don't know how they're going to do the points, but whatever she does, I think it's going to be offset by, maybe a bottom, if not last place finish in that 1,600-meter run.
Yeah, and you kind of have to think of all the athletes to see the workouts be released so far, and then see Dave drop a sandbag.
Mm-hmm.
Like Danny Spiegel was just maybe like lifted up a few notches in that one post alone, just by the fact of like, okay, it's not just a sprint. It's something that she might even be better at. Now she's got to have to recover. And then I think we're all assuming then run 1,600 meters on the track. So that event is going to be really interesting as far as like recoverability, and then in the heat and be able to really just turn the jets on and see what you got left, especially for athletes that fall into this area where that might be all they have. This and then Chad in the morning. The next morning is like, you're just going to have to do what you have to do. But as we were talking about at the beginning, like, this is where I always get super like hesitant around like rankings and stuff. I mean, we only know 4 events. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a cut here of 10 athletes. And I see from both of your lists, Danny Spiegel, Kyra Milligan, athletes like that, where it's like, okay, well, based on what we got so far, I kind of got to put them here. But if we got to Thursday of next week and it was like, well, we know 95% of all the events, and maybe there's one pop-up, it's like, well, how much would that change? Or who would you throw where? Just not even having them do an event yet, but just have it be like, okay, we know all the events, or know what we can know so far.
I mean, to that point, it's something that I think about a lot, because the year that they had semifinals, I think it was 2021, where all the semifinals could program completely independently. They didn't have to even have the 2 workouts that were designated from CrossFit that year. Once the athletes were seeded into semifinals, I did a series of rankings. And then after each of the semifinals programming was released, I made a couple of tweaks to the changes, especially right on the cut line, as I thought, well, there's like 4 or 5 athletes that I could see finishing in these last 2 or 3 positions. And these workouts look really good on paper for this person and not for this person. So I'll make a little change. That changes that I made after the fact actually ended up yielding worse results relative to the actual finishes of the athletes. And so when it comes down to it, yes, I do think that, and I'm going to highlight this and talk about this, that's to some extent the workouts do matter for some of the athletes, especially on these cut lines. But in general, in this sport, fitness prevails. And the fitter athletes usually find a way to the top. 7 workouts is plenty of workouts for athletes who are fit enough to have the capacity to express that. And if you don't think that you can, if you think you can show up to the CrossFit Games and not be a good runner and do well there, then you're sorely mistaken. All of these athletes are running a lot, and some of them will look a lot better running at the CrossFit Games than even that they did at the semifinal, especially athletes that are maybe bubble semifinal athletes, because this is the first year that they've had to run outside at a semifinal. And so they weren't necessarily preparing for that. Every year at the CrossFit Games, you're going to have 3 running workouts at a minimum. Or maybe that's the average, but it seems to be 3 pretty much every year, unless there's like a double sprint event or something like that counts as 2. So I do think that we're going to see a better running in general, but it's still like just with that many of the workouts being kind of in that long and running time domain, it is certainly going to be. Was that me? What the heck? It is going to be hard for some of those athletes who don't excel at that.
Yeah, I think that's what the bottom 10 kind of reflects, are athletes who, one, they either come from a region where, that's not a very strong region in terms of competition wise, or they just barely got in a competitive region, or based on the workouts that we see, that we know so far, they're not going to do we don't expect them to do very well. And then, I mean, like Halpin said, there's still like 4 other events that have been released. But the way I look at it is like those 4 events, if they're CrossFit events where they're testing fitness, like a couplet or a triplet or something like that, are any of these athletes going to beat any of the athletes ahead of them? None of these athletes, I think, would be maybe a specialist that would probably win an event or finish top 15 or 20 in an event to help them. Because some of these athletes who will have bottom finishes, they need home runs to stay relevant. They need home runs to I don't mean to say the word relevant, but to beat the cut and make the cut.
No, you're exactly right about that. Is that having the capacity to take a top 5 on a workout is massive. Mm-hmm. With the way that the women's field is right now, it's really hard to get top 5s unless you're one of the top 10 women, because they're all just amazing at all those things. Or there's some people that are, specialists at specific things, but a lot of them are also in the top 10 athletes overall. If you are one of these athletes that's especially in the bottom 10 on this list, first of all, is there a workout that you can place top 5 at the CrossFit Games at? The answer is probably no for most of them. It would have to be like a super specific thing that might come up once every 5 years. And then even then, I don't know, just because the top guys are that good. And secondarily, are you going to get that workout? And for some of them, it may not show up any at all during the year. And for others, we know that every year it shows up a little bit after some of the athletes get cut.
Yeah. So looking at both your lists here, and I think we touched on Danny Spiegel being in on Brian's list and out on PC's list. Flip it the other way. Let me see. Caroline Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see in her, Patrick versus Brian, that keeps her out of the cut or inside the cut?
Her capacity to run. She really showed that off at the semifinals at Syndicate, and she loves running, and I think she's one of those athletes who, in terms of fitness, she's there. She's better than, I think, she's proved that she's better than Alexi Neely. She's proven that she's better than some of those other ladies, at 31. I mean, I guess the comparison, her and Kyra. I mean, Kyra's a little bit stronger, but but Caroline's she's a better runner. So that's why I put Caroline in front of someone like Kyra. And I think their fitness is probably just about even. Kyra might be a little bit better when it comes to like legless rope climbs and ring muscle ups, but I think when it comes to like, again, a double, a test of fitness, that Caroline is probably fitter than Kyra in certain things, certain aspects.
Yeah, I mean, PC is right about that. Caroline is a good runner, and she can potentially have an opportunity to do really well on that carry running workout. It's a pretty good swimming field for women overall. I'm not sure how she's going to fare in the water, and and Chad, even though it's a longer workout, I don't think it's going to be the best for her. I think she's going to be right on the line, obviously, with the 31st of that initial cut. And when I was just, what I more or less did in this list was I tried to guess who I thought was a fitter athlete more often than not, especially when I was getting close to that cut line. And in some cases, like the other big discrepancy that PC and I have is Linda Keishman.
I was about to ask. Yeah, that was the flip side of that. Yeah,
and he's got her in 35th. And Linda is admittedly not the best runner, so that might not be great for her. But I do think that she's going to do really well on Chad. And I also think if you were a person who listened to a lot of Dave's interviews, I think she's like sells herself short more than most of the athletes. Like she's kind of self-deprecating in a way in that regard. She's better than she thinks, or that she represents herself. She had a good showing at semifinals. And she also, I think an advantage that she has is that she's been spending a lot of time in the States, in Alpharetta, Georgia, which is a humid and hot place. And I think for the European athletes, obviously a lot of them come over here early and whatever, but she's had multiple months here, even prior to semifinals this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I saw Moritz post something a day or two ago, asking for a friend, anyone know how long it takes to acclimate to time change and weather? And you think about, like, there's still a couple athletes in Europe that haven't come over here yet. I don't think that that's going to be an issue for her at all. I think that she's got a great coach. I don't think he's very distracted this year with many other athletes, like the athletes that are going there from Training Think Tank are like Alexis has her own thing going on. Travis has been there 10 times. It's not, so I think that she can get some good resources from a very experienced coach, and these kind of intangible things can matter for her.
And I agree with everything Brian said there. I mean, obviously she's doing all the right things, but what Brian did bring up is, like, I think it's that confidence. Like, she's not giving herself enough credit. And as a rookie, you can't have that. If you're second guessing yourself, or you don't feel like you belong, or you're questioning how good you actually are, if you don't already know that going into the games, it's gonna affect you. And that's why that reason alone, and her not being the greatest runner, is a reason why I have her in that spot where she's not making the cut. It's one of those things that you hear rookies talking about all the time. They're just, they weren't right there mentally. They got caught up in the lights. They looked over there and they saw, oh my God, it's Tia, and I'm in her, next lane next to her, or whatever. I don't know if Linda, she's got a great training environment that should prepare her, but just from everything I've heard her speak and talk, I think she's a year away. I think she's going to be kind of like Abigail was last year. Where Abigail had all the skills, and then she showed it this year. And I think they're very comparable in terms of type of athletes that they are. And even like Rebecca Vidison. I think Linda is very similar to like a Rebecca Vidison in terms of, but Rebecca had a little bit more experience, as a team athlete, and a lot more competition experience, I believe.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't mean this about Linda specifically, but I mean, I don't know who else is watching the Olympics right now, but I just get the same feeling about like the semifinals to the games as you may get like a trials, like a national trials to the Olympics. Like, for some of these athletes, just being listed here, I mean, the Sean Woodland quote, like, you don't know how good you have to be to suck at the CrossFit Games. Like, that is the goal. Like, some of these athletes just making it out of Afra for like Gemma or somebody, like, that is the goal, is to just be here and be amongst these 40 women. So like, you don't necessarily know when it's a rookie, like, how much that's going to play into an athlete, just like mentally or otherwise, to say like, no, I just really just put my whole heart into semifinals and I happen to make it, and then I'm just going to ride it out and see what happens from here. Or I made it to the Olympics. I'm just now standing next to like some of these other Olympians, and I'm just happy to be in the same heat as them. I'm not planning to win an event or win multiple events to get myself in a cut or otherwise. So,
and
like,
PC,
that's just what, yeah. Go ahead.
PC mentioning this thing about the confidence, and you talking about the mental, discipline of being at the games, or what's the mental mindset that you're in showing up there. This matters so much, especially on these cut lines, because and it actually is going to matter all the way up the leaderboard. The biggest thing that you want to look for if you're watching the CrossFit Games and you want to see someone's potential there is their ability to fight for points every time they take the floor. And what I mean is, you're not going to win every workout. You're not going to win your heat every time. There's going to be things that are good for you. There's going to be things that are bad for you. But every workout, no matter who you are, you're going to find yourself in a situation. And when we're talking about the middle of the pack, we're not talking about the best of the best or the worst of the worst. But inside that, when you're looking at the 10th place, 20th place, even 30th place in these workouts, you're going to be going head to head with somebody or another one or two athletes in your heat or on the field of play. And the ones that are able to steal 3 to 5 points, depending on how many athletes are remaining in the competition, event after event after event, there's a huge difference that can be accounted for there. I got something I want to show you guys when we get to the top 10 athletes that can really highlight this. but all the way down the line, you know that at that cut line, there's going to be 1 to 5 points that's going to separate somebody being in and somebody being out. And every athlete that's on that cut, I mean, you could go back and watch Jason Hopper do Helena last year. It was the last event before he got cut, and he was completely checked out mentally. He didn't have the same tenacity that we've seen from him at semifinals in all these years that we saw from him the year that he was battling in the top 10 at the games. And because of that, he didn't make the cut. He didn't get a chance to run in the morning. He didn't get a chance to lift the next day, and he finishes 31st when, he could have had a very similar performance to Kelly Baker on Sunday and charged up 8 spots in the leaderboard in one day, but he wasn't in it mentally. And some of these athletes will check out mentally after the first event when they take a 36th, and others of them will shake it off and then get right back in the fight. And so that's what you want to look for, is who's continuing to battle and fight and who's kind of given up for whatever reason. And it'll happen both ways.
And that's one reason, like we'll talk about this one other difference, unless you see something else, Mike, in the bottom 10 here, is that why I pick someone like Victoria to make the cut, to improve, is that she's been there, she's grinding. She's not as, I guess, fitness wise fitter than some of these women ahead of her. But I think her experience, her mental capacity, her knowing what it feels like to be in the cut, and being cut. I think that's why I have her making that first cut. And and I think the workouts do kind of work in her favor. I think she's going to do really good in chat, and I think that workout chat itself is going to be one of those determining factors. That someone like her and Choi, Hattie, and even someone like Jackie Dahlstrom, where I have them all around the cut line. That's going to propel them, because I think those women right there, I think just those 4 women I described are women. They're just grinders, and they'll die on their shield. We've seen that with Jackie Dahlstrom when it came to like the sandbag clean. I mean, she's tough as they come. And then Hattie is just a tough woman, and Choi, she has a lot to prove, and I think she's just strong enough to do some of this stuff. And
I definitely wanted to ask about Campos. The other one that I was seeing from both of you guys, and it even speaks to this mental piece, and otherwise we see it with some athletes, is sort of the opposite. Like they sort of checked out already, and I'll just say Chloe, like, I think retired before, like, at some point before this season. So like we just see maybe the opposite, where it's just like, I have nothing to lose here. Like I am just going to go and give it my all in every single workout. She's been at the games multiple times before on a team and as an individual. I just think somebody like that may have that extra, like, just peace, and like I said, nothing to lose but everything to gain sort of mentality of just like, no, I'm gonna make the first cut and see where I get to, because the whole season is basically like, I'm just gonna make the next cut, I'm gonna make the next event, I'm gonna make the next heat, and then just go from there. So I'm excited to see what she does. Again, you two are brave enough to put your rankings out there. I don't have to sit here and go and defend my rankings. But so I totally get it. Like, as we've said a few times, like, it's 40 spots, so you got to put them somewhere. But somebody like that, I'm really interested to see what she does with all this.
Well, that you described there, I could call that competing free, where you're not, you're not stressed out by a good event or a bad event. I actually talked to her at the East semifinal after she crushed that last workout, and I was like, you might have, like, you might make it to the games. She's like, I'm not making to the games. I'm just happy to be here. And I'm like, I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at how other people did in this heat. I'm like thinking to myself, like, I'm pretty sure you're gonna make it. Like, and she just was like not even thinking about it. And if you watch the announcement when they say that she made the games, I mean, it was just complete surprise. So everything's just a bonus for her. She's just probably enjoying training this summer, finding out what she can do, and she's going to continue to do that at the games. I think she's, obviously I put her right there, just coming up a little bit short of making the cut, but by all means, that's a type of athlete that's that absolutely could benefit from not worrying about that stuff at all and just going out there and competing.
Yeah. I mean, it's very similar to what Panchek did a couple years ago. Hopefully she stays healthy, and Chloe's always been a very, sorry, Scott. When Scott was just
when he finished 11th place on half a knee.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So, I mean, obviously I don't want that to happen, but it was kind of like, Scott was like, hey, I'm just going to do them because, I love CrossFit. I love the methodology. I own a affiliate, so I love fitness. So he was doing 1 hour a day, and and they kept on advancing in the stages. I think Chloe is a very similar position when you have no expectations. So, all right, then we get into our second.
Well, PC, you gotta account for your ranking of McQuaid here for V. That seems low for McQuaid. Yeah. She's a consistent performer when she's healthy.
Yeah, and I totally agree when she's healthy. I just think she's one of the veteran athletes in this field. I believe, and I hate to use age, but I mean, she's one of these athletes who, I don't know. I mean, she's not spectacular in one single thing. She's just very fit. And I just think some of these other athletes, they're either they just have a higher ceiling than McQuaid does at this point in their career. I mean, that's just how I kind of look at it. And it's and Halpin's right. To put our lists out there, it's kind of putting ourselves out there and then kind of explaining it. And I really don't have the explanation. It's just like that's just how it felt. When I was doing that, I just thought there was other women like Claudia Gluck. I thought Claudia Gluck has more upside than Emma does at this point when it comes to the games. Same with Caroline Stanley. Anyone ahead of her. But she's also one of those athletes that can definitely be, when healthy and everything turns out right, she can be a top 15, top 12 athlete. She's done it before, as soon as early as 3 years ago, right?
Well, she's had 2021 and 2022. She finished 12th at the games. And then last year she was 36th. And if you go back and look at her semifinal performances, in the years that she finished 12th at the game, she was first and second. And then the year that she finished 36th, she was 10th. We know she was injured throughout that entire season. She finished 9th this year. And so I would expect her to have a lower finish than the 12th. But I still think that the people that comments like Emma can grind PC, like this kind of stuff. I think she can. I think she's got the veteran savvy to find her way into the top 20. I don't think she's going to push super high into the top 20, as you'll see. But I do think, and by the way, when I was making these rankings, like the first four athletes that I left off here, 21 through 24, that was difficult for me to not put those in the top 20. And with the first maybe 4 athletes that I have inside the cut line of the top 20, that was a group of 8 that I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about and contemplating where to put them. And I do think that those 4 athletes in particular, Grace Walton, Seher Kaya, Shelby Neal, Amy Kringle, have a great chance to make the top 20. I just kind of gave the nod to a different 4 in this case.
Yeah. And I think when you sent me your picks, you had them segmented. And one of the groups you called it had to have a perfect run. And that's who you described as someone like those athletes that you just listed. Like those athletes have a potential to be top 20, even top 15, if there was a perfect run. And and I think that's basically what this group comes through is 21 through 29. These are all athletes that can be in the other half of the 20s, but for whatever reason, I just think there's women that are better or fitter or I don't know, different part of their season. Emma McQuaid, what you said about her, she kind of reminds me of she's like the female version of Cole Sager at this point.
We'll get to the men on Thursday and certainly have some conversations about that.
Yeah, but again, Cole Sager's one of those grinded out, you never count him out. But then, he had a drop off last year. And I think at some point, it's always said that time is undefeated. And, when it, so I don't know.
We'll see. There's, on the women's side, she's got Briggsy in her corner. Briggs defied the logic of the time for a long, long time. She's only 34. Just Emma McQuaid. I don't think she's too old to still have a top 20 push. Jonathan Ortega, how many of your picks are tied to liking the athlete versus actual performance? This is, I would say, especially for me, is very difficult because I do have some really good relationships with athletes that are competing. But I really try my best to dissociate any of that from what I think they're going to do on the competition floor. So I'm sure that there's still some bias that's difficult for me to shed, but I really try hard not to do that.
Yeah. And I tried not, obviously you'll see with one of my picks, it's more recency in my relationship with that athlete. And it's the athlete you have at 22nd. I do.
Oh, wow. Come on.
Well, I know. I will say, but I'll be
we all saw this coming.
I know.
I scanned for her basically first, and I was like, well, she's not in the bottom 20.
Yeah.
I'll say it. I'll defend you a little bit, and I'll say it Ortega sort of hits it on the nail. Like there's certain athletes that, yes, you have a liking to them or you have a proximity to them, but that can sort of speak in a few different like ways, right? Like you saw Sahir in the Far East, Throwdown, directly. Same with, I know we only have so much time here, but same with like Julia Cato, you ranking her higher. There's certain athletes where physically you saw them perform maybe head and shoulders over other athletes in the same region. But I mean, maybe we want to flip over to the next area here. Like I do want to hear you speak about Sahir, because I think she's going to be a lot better this year, but I'm sort of trying to even do like a mental check here of where she's about to show up on your side of the list.
Yeah, and you'll see, and looking at it, it's like, it's hard but then I know how hard she trains, but it doesn't mean and that's simply how it is, and it's not only just her, but hearing from other athletes. Part of what we do as analysts is like we go, we see them, we talk to their coaches, and we talk to other athletes and training partners, and I talk to some well-known athletes, and they. And again, they might have some biases as well, but they've said the same thing. So we'll get to that in there. Is there anything else that's kind of maybe?
I'll just go through a couple of comments here. My heart pick for Lynn. My heart pick is Emma Tall in the top 10. I don't want to hear nothing. Emma Tall for top 10 is not just a heart pick. That actually really could happen this year for sure. Luke Parker, top 10 for Sarah Cooper. Less likely to happen, but why not? I have a crush on him. And
guy.
There's always 2 to 3 dark horses, Kevin Doyle, that are impossible to pick, and then a couple flops that are totally unexpected. 100%. I'm pretty sure that I had Cole Sager in the top 15 last year. He was 35th. I'm pretty sure I had Bailey Martin 38th, and he finished 12th. And even for someone that studies the sport and watches the sport as much as I do, that's going to be the case. Kevin so hit it right on the head.
Yeah. So I do give a shout out before we move on to the other is Gemma Rader. It's like, her first time. I think she's gonna make her country. I mean, we have her at 40th, but it's not she's gonna finish last in every event. She's not gonna finish last. She's gonna have a lot of bottom finishes that still last. So, but I'm interested to see how well she does.
Jonathan Ortega. My heart picks are Loewen and Sprague, top 5. I have a crush on James. All right.
See, Ortega, there might be proximity bias though, because you were just out there with him. So.
Those are the two of the athletes he's made some pretty cool content about this year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do we want to talk about Grace Walton at all? I mean, obviously,
it's always tough with these. Like you don't end up talking about like who's like right at the top of the list because it's sort of maybe self-explanatory. She's who I really keyed in on when I was looking at this article around like, will a rookie make the top 10? And I think that's asking a lot from Grace. But like, I mean, the list of people that have won the Torian Pro, you kind of have to put her on that mantle there. It's like, well, I mean, if she's good enough to beat Maddie Sturt, then you kind of want to give her some credit here.
But Maddie Sturt and her have been within 3 points and 10 points the last 2 years of the semifinal. They were both just bumped up because the 3 women that qualified last year didn't compete on an individual basis this year. They had their performances looked amazing out there, but who are they competing against? And if you look at Maddie Sturt, like I do think that Maddie Sturt has been getting fitter throughout her career, and I think she's made a big jump forward this year. PC has them 21 and 22. I think I have Maddie like 17 or something like that, and Grace at 21. Maddie Sturt has a veteran experience of competing at the games 4 times, but she's never been able to finish inside the top 15. She's just a middle of the pack, like a 17 through 22 type of a person. She's kind of always been like that. And I think as she's gotten better, the field's gotten better, she's going to stay in that range. And I think that Grace Walton's also very likely to be in that range in her first season, which is a good first season. I mean, that's what, if you want to, if she finishes 19th to 21st, like she's right in that same ballpark as a lot of rookies that have gone on to make a big jump forward in their second year, which I think is most likely scenario for Grace.
I just hope this year the cut event for 20 the second cut is actually a test of fitness as opposed to like a strength last year.
Helena was a great test to have right before the first cut. Having the Olympic total before the second cut, not necessarily ideal.
So I'm hoping, because if that's the case, you're going to see, I don't know, it's going to be fun to watch. I just think it wasn't very compelling with the Olympic total, because you knew, certain athletes were going to drop down, but when it came to just pure strength. But again,
This
that's
is
just how the test.
this is a relevant comment from Jess, but also maybe not that relevant. People are really hyping Walton. I have a hard time thinking that she got 15th at Wodapalooza and then she's going to, have a much better performance at the games. Keep in mind that Rebecca Fuselier was 9th at Wodapalooza and she didn't come anywhere near making the cut at semifinals. What happened at Wodapalooza this year with the rain greatly impacted the test and the well-rounding part of the test there. And it was clearly, we talked about it at the time on the broadcast and in the review afterwards, it clearly had an impact on that middle part of the leaderboard. Carrie, Megala, Brandon, Loewen, those were always going to be the top 4 no matter what, because of what I said earlier, of fitness just prevailing. But for athletes like Grace Walton, Danny Spiegel, Fuselier, Elizabeth Wishart, some of these, it was really good for them. Some of it was really bad for them. It was only 5 workouts over 2 days. While it is a good touch point because we don't have a lot of experience or any other experience of her competing against an international field outside of Oceania, it's also one that I don't think it correlates to the CrossFit Games very well. In fact, of the big off-season competitions, Wodapalooza usually has the worst correlation compared to Dubai and Rogue when you stack it up to the CrossFit Games. So good observation, but I don't think that in that case, that's why I would be picking against Grace Walton.
Yeah. Yeah. My apologies to Shelby Neal. Sorry for the misspelling if she's watching. Yeah. So, yeah. So
She'll
my
hold that
apologies
against
on
you.
that.
Don't worry.
That's on me. That's on me, Shelby. I'm sorry. All right. We're going to move on to the final 20, I guess.
Oh, shoot, they're all there.
Oh,
okay.
Well, cat's out of the bag, huh?
Yes.
Well, nothing.
I figured
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Whoa, wait a second.
Yeah.
Hold on. Okay, well, let's maybe ignore the top 10 for a second. Hard to ignore, but okay, let's maybe keep going where we're going. Claudia
So
Brian.
moving on, Brian had Amy missing the cut. I have Amy making the cut, the final cut. And and I believe she'd be my highest rated rookie. And it's just based on her skill set, based off the 4 workouts. And what I saw in Europe, Brian, you were there in person, but what I saw in Europe was just impressive. And I've been kind of talking about how she's kind of remained like silent when it came to her training this year. And then her, just her and training with Harry, and she just seems like she's just in a good spot. And she's one of those athletes I think that's built for the games.
Yeah, it's like I said, she was right in that group of athletes that it was really hard for me to come between. I think she had one of the more impressive semifinal performances of any athletes that I saw compete at the ones that I was able to go to, in terms of what she did compared to what I was expecting her to do. And she did just barely edge out Claudia Gluck, taking 5th there behind a pretty obvious top 4 in Laura, Gabby, Amatal, and Karin Freyova. And but I like Claudia Gluck a little bit better than her, just in general, based on the experience that she has, the composure that I've seen from her. Dubai last year obviously was a great showing for her, but there were specific things that I saw from her at Dubai and also the semifinal this year that I think lead to a little bit of a maturity in terms of an athlete, of able to navigate the ups and downs of a competition weekend. She handled the pressure of performing inside the arena there in France. Both her and Victor did very well. It's a big deal for them in that country to compete, and to compete well when the whole crowd is chanting your name. And I think that Claudia Gluck's a fighter. I think that she's got a great environment of coaches around her. So I like her chances to sneak into the top 20. But I do think that both her, Fuliano, who I have at the bottom here, are probably going to run into some workouts on the last day that are going to cause them to slip towards the bottom of the pack. So that was the thought with those 2 athletes specifically sneaking in and then being at the bottom of this group eventually.
Man, the comments! I didn't realize my just a switch of spot.
Wow, let's just switch to spot.
Just a switch of spot. Man, we'll get to that though. But I appreciate it. Bring it. I'll defend that pick. But I didn't think it'd be that big of a deal. 2nd to 3rd. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, Mike, anything that sticks out, like maybe 5 through 20 for you, or You know,
Well, we talked about it on the previous page because she was absent of it. So Sahir Kaya,
yeah,
13th. I was expecting 18th. I knew she'd be
Yeah.
on this side of the list for you, but like seeing her
I was expecting 18 also, Mike.
seeing her 13th above some even athletes that you talked about, Abigail Dammit, like seeing her in that place, like I know you're close with Sahir. I know she's an athlete that you see a lot of. What do you think that looks like all the way through Sunday here for her to put her in the spot in the
well, I
final
think
day?
one, she's gonna have the first 7 workouts. I wouldn't be surprised after the first 7 workouts that she's in that place, in top 15. You know, and really, she won't be last in the clean ladder or whatever that may be. She's actually gotten a little bit stronger. 225 is a very easy weight for her.
Okay.
Where some other athletes might have a little bit trouble with that. But I think just based on the modalities, she's an excellent sprinter. She's an excellent runner. I mean, last year she would have been top 5. She just went too hot in the 5K. She could keep up with some of the taller girls. She's a lot fitter this year. And just talking to the athletes that have been alongside of her, trained alongside of her. I mean, she gets a lot of flack in Asia, but she trains in Oslo with some of the best athletes. Kristen Holte is her coach. And Kristen Holte, she's still beating Kristen Holte, and she's beating Kristen Holte in workouts, which Holte now could still compete with this game's field. And this is coming from Holte. Holte's competed against some of the best, and she said this is the best Sahara's ever. The training that Sahara's doing is just off the charts. And so far, all the workouts, like every time a workout's released, it's just like I just smile. And Brian got to see her a little bit when he was in Norway, and she was, I guess, doing some practicing on Chad. And Chad, she's been living with the ruck, the go ruck. If you look at any of her past stories or things, she's doing ring muscle ups with ruck. She lives with that go ruck bag.
I think I actually have gotten a chance to train with her twice this past year, 12-month period of time. And one of the things that's interesting about her training is that because of the state of competition in Asia, I think we've talked about this once before, the semifinals doesn't feel like such a critical weekend for her compared to the athletes that are competing in Europe, where it's, unless you're Laura and Gabby, maybe Emma and Karin, like everyone else there, you have to peak for that competition and hope that it's good enough to have your chance at the CrossFit Games. Sahara at this point is confident enough that she can kind of small taper into semifinals and still have more than enough to come away with a games qualification spot, which means that for the entirety of the year, they can really focus on the CrossFit Games. And she did have the best performance in the history of Asian women at the Games last year, taking 23rd. And I do think she's going to flirt with the cut line once again this year. I would say that 13th is kind of a crazy pick. But, but like 16th to 20th, if she makes the cut, absolutely, I can see her in that range. I still think I picked her 1 or 2 spots better than she had last season.
22 or 21.
But there's some good comments in here that are like, they're big factors in terms of the cut line. And Bethany Flores is probably the biggest one. I mean, someone put a comment a while ago now that was just about, I have a hard time picking her, knowing that she's, of the health that she's in. Well, we knew that she was in this situation last year, and I was hesitant to pick her last year. But, a lot of people are seemingly pro Shelby Neal that are watching this podcast. But look back at the first 8 events last year at the Games. Bethany had 5 finishes or 6 finishes inside the top 13. Shelby Neal had 2. Bethany Flores knows how to compete at the CrossFit Games, and we never knew how good she could have been. But all of the women that are in that top 10 are women that were afraid of Bethany Flores 3 years ago in 2021. And if she, yes, it's more than likely that she will have 1 or 2 dramatic hits on the leaderboard in the heaviest events that are out there. But when it comes to capacity and fitness and gymnastics and body weight and running and swimming, like she's really good. She's got top 10 potential in all of those things. She's in a similar situation to maybe what Danielle Brandon was in the last 2 years, where she just can't squat heavy. She can't deadlift heavy. And so there's going to be a couple, glaring landmines that knock her down into this range on the leaderboard.
if you look at that segment of athletes from, kind of jumping ahead from Haley Adams to Bethany Flores, what kind of stands out in terms of type of athlete they are, in terms of how I grouped them?
In terms of what?
The athletes from Haley, the group of athletes, 9 through 14, what type of athletes would you say those athletes are?
Experienced, veteran,
And what else?
aerobic.
Yeah. And that's why I have them all grouped in that area, because a lot of those athletes, I think the first 7 workouts are going to help propel them into that spot. Someone, Haley Adams, Brooke
But
Wells.
didn't you think it flips the other way?
It
Is
might.
that your mentality sort of on
I think
some of these
so.
picks is like it's going to shift the other way. There's going to be
I
a
think
heavy.
there will
Well, I
be.
mean, we know about the clean, but like there's going to be
Yeah.
a few heavy events, a few
I don't think
events that go the other way on them.
I don't think so. I think what it'll be, with all the workouts being inside, and granted, they can do a lot of stuff inside. They can do some heavy stuff inside. But I think at the end of the day, with Dave's first, he's kind of said and hinted at, it's like this is a return to fitness. And if that's the case, then these athletes, they're not the, they're also good at fitness too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do.
Yeah, I was wondering. Oh, good. Oh, well, I was just going to say, on the same athletes, Haley, Brooke, they weren't there last year. They're the ones that, as you have them here, jump right back into the top 10, besides the 6-time champ there. We'll get there. But like, I see this in a few comments. I see this in a few rankings and a few other shows that happen. Again, I'm not putting rankings out, so I don't know where to place some of these. But like, what do you do with that sort of thing when it's they had a year off, or they had an injury, or they have whatever it be? They looked very promising up against some of the athletes that you're ranking higher than them at the semifinal, but you place them 10th. Does it just come down to event picking for that, or is there other things you have in mind?
I have something I want to show you in a second about the top 10 specifically here. But I did want to just have a second to talk about Abigail Domit. We both have her here around 15, 16. And there was a comment way at the beginning of the show. Someone brought up about athletes that make a big jump from their first year to their second year. Obviously, we had, Alex Gazan, Arielle Loewen she really made a big jump from her second year to her third year. But Abigail Domit, based on what we saw at semifinals, feels like an athlete who could make a significant push up the leaderboard this year. I just don't know how far. And all of the athletes that I have ahead of her are athletes that have already proven to have the ability to place 14th or higher. Abigail Domit, if she finishes 15th, that would be a substantial jump up the leaderboard. Could she end up finishing 10th? Absolutely. I just didn't feel like it was warranted to give her that credit based on one great performance at the semifinal weekend against a couple women there that I think were in a Seher Kaya type of situation, specifically Arielle Loewen and Alex Gazan, where they looked at the depth of the field out west and they weren't stressing qualifying for the games, and it wasn't critical for them to necessarily win that competition. So I would expect those athletes that she beat at the West semifinal to be more primed and prepped and ready to show their full potential at the games. And the rest of the athletes that are ahead of her are the top 4 women from Europe and the top 6 women from North America East. And we know that the caliber of those athletes are.
Yeah. Mike, going back to your question, which I completely forgot what it was. I guess you were asking
how we just like athletes that had a year off besides Tia, athletes that had a year off, like Haley and Brooke.
How we would just like kind of.
How do you just immediately put them right back there, or it seems like you're giving them plenty as veterans in the sport, but like I think
here's a fun one for you, Mike. So I pulled 2018 and then 2021, 21, 22, 23 top 11 female athletes. Everyone in red is an athlete who's not competing this year. Obviously, there's only 3 returning athletes from the 2018 games. Blue is Tia, by the way, and green at the top is Laura Horvath. You can, but unless you're, I guess what did he say here, Ryan? Unless you're smoking the good stuff like PC, you're picking Laura and Emma at 1 and 2, probably Tia, and then Laura, whose shirt I'm wearing today. When PC, we'll have a chance to talk about that in a second. The rest of the women on this list, so you see Brooke Wells there, the last 2 years that she competed healthy was in 2018 and 2022. She finishes 8th and 5th. In 2021, she probably would have been 5th or 6th if she didn't break her elbow. So, 5th through 8th seems like a very consistent placing for her amongst these years. And obviously she missed it last year. And then you can just look and see where the rest of the women fall. But specifically for you asking Haley Adams, 5th place in 2021. She slips to 9th in 2022, but she was 1 point behind Magawa for 8th. And this is what I wanted to. And then if you look up one spot from that, 890, which was Cara Saunders, 3 points less than Lawson, 11 points less than Wells. Like, there's really tight margins here in this top 10. And I did a little study about Danielle Brandon that I think will highlight what I was referencing earlier. So in 2022, Danielle Brandon finishes 4th. The next year she finishes 9th, which seems like a massive regression. And she is a little bit off the pace there. You see 20 points, 30 points, and 60 points behind the 3 women ahead of her. But it's still less than, it's like 80 points or so to the spot that she was in the year before. There were less workouts in 2023 than there were in 2022, but her average finish in 2023 was about 1.5 points worse per event. 1.5 points worse per event over the course of 13 events, which is the average of the 2 from that week, from those 2 years, it's between 3 and 10 points per placement, depending on how many athletes are remaining in the field. But if you just do 5 points per place over 12 events, that's 60 points. And that's what I'm talking about. If you want to watch the CrossFit Games and have a purpose for watching, pay attention to the athletes in this group, specifically on the women's side, and watch event by event of who is getting 5 points here, 4 points here, 3 points here relative to the other athletes. There will be a race where you see Adams, Magawa, and Lawson all racing to the finish in something. Who gets the first, who gets the third? That's potentially 10 points difference on a Sunday. And if you start adding up, because what it ends up doing is it creates that momentum and that mental fortitude to go back out there and fight again, If you're constantly the one that's losing by a spot or 2, I thought back to 2021 the clean ladder, the first one. Medeiros, Vellner, and Pakowski come in. Vellner misses, Pakowski misses, Medeiros hits it. And in that moment, before anything else happened, it was event 6. And then the next one was event 7. I said, that was a critical moment in this games because Medeiros just stole points against his 2 biggest threats. He was already showing up great that weekend. Those are the moments you want to look for. And those are the moments that will make the difference amongst these. There's not a bad pick here. All these women have a chance to take 3rd. Everyone on this list. They all have a chance to take 10th too. It's going to come down to execution.
Yeah.
This is a pretty cool chart. I like it.
Anyway, based on that chart there, PC, do you want to defend some of your picks here that they're giving you a hard time about, specifically Gabby and Danielle Brand?
Yeah, let's start with Danielle, because I think as you get higher up the list, and higher being first or podium, it's like an exponential piece here that you kind of have to explain, because it's only 4 spots that you rank Danielle differently, but it's a substantial 4 spots of, say, right off the podium versus just inside the top 10.
Well, and that's the thing is when you say 4th, everyone thinks, oh, you just missed the podium. I actually think that obviously the podium runners are actually going to run away with it. And then you're going to have that group after it. And it's going to be a close set of points like Brian discussed before. I just think Danielle Brandon's just going to have a bigger percentage of those points based off of what we're going to see, again, off the 7 workouts. I know that's a lot. I'm putting a lot on 7 workouts, but that's half the points right there. And I think out of everyone that in that field, she's the better runner, better sprinter, probably the better swimmer outside of some of these women like Tia and even Gabby. I think DB is, I'm not going to, man, I almost want to say DB wins the swim, like portion of that. That Tia and DB are, I think it's going to be close. We have yet to see DB go flat out, just full out.
No one's coming close to beating Tia on that workout. If you want to take just their split times in the water, maybe.
Yeah.
Heat one app, everybody. Pick Danielle Brandon.
Here's the argument for Danielle Brandon.
That'll be a minority pick there.
Here's the argument for Danielle Brandon finishing 4th. She had 4 workouts that were outside the top 20th or worse last year. It was on the bike ride event. We don't have a long outdoor riding event. That's great for her. Doesn't look like we're going to have one. She was 21st on the pig chipper. That's a heavy implement. She was 20th on alpaca redux. That was a heavy implement. And she was 26th on the Olympic total. Heavy implement. She's been able to lift heavier this year than she has the last 2 years. And if she is able to improve those performances by 3 spots per place, then she probably finishes 5th last year instead of 9th. That's the argument for Danielle Brandon. You're welcome, PC.
And those are, I mean, you just broke it down more in terms of, you brought historical reference on it. I'm just bringing, this is a different DB. I mean, we've all seen it. Mike, you've kind of seen it, how she's evolved. She's training by herself. She has a coach that's just like, she's not under a camp. She's there and she's just grinding and just putting in the work. And I've seen it. I've talked to people, again, just at some of the camps, they're saying this is a healthy version of her. This is one everything's intentional with her, and there hasn't been much drama involving her. She's just probably the health. I keep on saying health, but it is health with DB. Look what she's done with a bad back, not a bad back, but a sore, or just being very cautious about it.
And you touched on it for a second, and I put out a post this morning. Me in the morning chalk up is about this whole Dave Camps thing. I do not want to talk about that. But I'll just speak to, there is one athlete in particular that just told Dave Castro she thinks camps are funny and has plenty to say about camps. And she, I would think, would probably say that she is a Coach L athlete, not a brute athlete.
Exactly.
And that may come down to who says what. And I do like just to speak on it shortly, I do like Castro's piece that he's going to ask the athletes who they are, what team they are on. He's not going to ask the coaches. I did do some homework for that post. I asked all of the coaches in camps, and I reported exactly what they told me. So I do think that's a big piece, training alone, training with the same coach for the entire season, not having to be quarantined or some of the other things that were in play in the last few years for Daniel Brandon. So I could definitely see it. Where I'm curious, before we even get to the shakeup on the podium here, is, and we see certain media from certain folks. So one that I'll call out, Alex Gazan. I think there's a lot of hype behind Alex Gazan. I think plenty of it is warranted. But when I see your two lists, 6th and 8th here, I think there's plenty saying that she has top 5 or better potential. So what would you think of Alex Gazan and where you have her?
I'll just say this. Every woman that's in the top 10 that I have there, I think can realistically finish in the top 5. This was really, really difficult to do. And when I was kind of slicing and dicing it up amongst all these athletes, I feel like Gabby's been knocking on the door of the podium. To me, she looked as good as I've ever seen her at the semifinal. And I have reason to believe that she's going to look even better at the games. PC says he thinks the top 3 are going to run away with it. I don't care what's going on with Emma Lawson mentally. I think she's still going to, I do care, but I don't think it's going to matter when it comes down to it. If she shows up to compete there, I'm believing that she's showing up competing healthy enough mentally to put forth the incredible performances that we know that she has. I am giving Raptis a little bit of credit here for her semifinal performance and things that I've seen from her in the offseason. But mostly I think this is going to be Tia, Gap, Laura, Gap. Really tight battle between Megala and Lawson, and then really tight battle between the next 6 women. And so it's kind of like, kind of cutting things up here and there. I do think that Alex Gazan has a potential to podium at some point in her career. I just don't think it's this year.
Yeah, I agree.
She's still only 22 years old, by the way. Like, don't forget that.
There's so many factors here that we just sort of graze or gloss right over. Okay, so let's talk about it. A no USA podium for both of you. And
did we look to confirm what flag is next to Tia's name?
Okay.
She can compete wherever she wants. Even the years that Sarah Sigma's daughter was in Cookville, I wasn't giving her credit for being from USA.
She's an awesome.
Whatever technicalities we have here.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the 2 Krypton athletic athletes then. 2 and 3.
You called them Krypton. You wouldn't have called them that a year ago.
Yeah, I did a little research for what's going on here. So both training with Ben Smith, both having been with him for quite a while. Best of friends here, but you have a grudge match here for 2nd and 3rd between the 2 of them. So let's hear it.
Brian, do you want, or should I go ahead and justify?
Brian's makes sense, PC. I think.
Oh, okay. Brian makes sense. Okay, I'm going to the
no
whole.
Offense to Gabby. Yeah.
I'm going with the whole iron sharpens iron.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to go back to the first 7 workouts. They look like they play more to Gabby's favor than Laura. And because of that whole iron sharpens iron. I mean, Gabby will do a lot better in those events that we know, minus the clean event. But even then, there's not a big discrepancy. I think there's a bigger discrepancy between Gabby and Laura in the workouts, like Chad, the running workout, the run swim. I think there's a bigger discrepancy than there is between Gabby and Laura in other workouts, in my opinion. And it's been shown. And Gabby has beaten Laura. She beat her at the 2021 Rogue Invitational. She beat her at semifinals last year. So it's not out of the realm that Gabby can beat Laura. And they've done it. And I'm sure she's done it in their training sessions. And I think that's why not just because she's dating her brother, but I think that's one reason why Laura keeps her to her side is, one, they get along great together. But I think she likes that everyday competition with it. You can't say that it doesn't make someone like Gabby better. And Gabby has different strengths than Laura, just like Laura has different strengths. But I think the gap between Laura and Gabby is closer in the events that Laura are better than Gabby at than it is the other way around. And that's why I have Gabby ahead of Laura in this particular instance.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people will say, oh, well, Laura didn't have that one workout that really crippled her last year, and that's why she was able to kind of have that 55, 60 point win over the field. She did, actually. I mean, it wasn't quite as bad as usual, but she still took a 27th on inverted medley. She still had to go upside down and do these pullovers, and she had that finish stands out. It's 12 spots worse than her next finish, which came on Helena.
Nadine,
what?
To kind of answer Nadine, Laura wasn't peaking at semis. Neither was Gabby.
Laura still beat her by 30 points there.
Yeah.
And Laura's worst finish was on the first workout, as expected. A couple of us had thought she might win the rest of the workouts. I think she was top 3, maybe had 1/4. And Gabby did hit a little bit of a landmine on event number 10, which was, the muscle ups come up and the lunging comes up, and we'll see. So I still think that Laura has shown enough class over her career that you have to give her the respect here. It's been interesting to me to watch on Instagram. She's basically saying, I'm coming to defend my title. And I love seeing that kind of confidence from her. And my hope is that we get something like we saw at the Rogue Invitational last year. Obviously, Tia was only 5.5 months after giving birth, and what she did there, in my opinion, is still the most impressive thing I've ever seen from her, despite the dominance at the games all the years. Like, that's insane that she was able to beat that entire field and come up one workout short of beating Laura 5.5 months after giving birth. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would love to see another nail biter finish between the two of them this season.
Yeah, so there it is. My winning picks.
How big do you think the gap is between Tia and your second place athlete?
Some of that depends on the total number of workouts. I think there's going to be, my guess is 13 workouts this year, 3-3-4-3 breakdown, and some with a fourth workout squeezed into one of the days of competition. That's a pretty short event, or a back-to-back style of or 2-scored event thing, like ringer 1, ringer 2, or a 30 muscle-ups for time. There are 14 workouts 2 years ago, 12 workouts last year. There's no rest day this year. And if there's 1,300 points available, I think that Tia is going to take around 1,100 of them. And then the second place athlete will have about 1,000. So I think it'll be about 100 point gap.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, about 100 points.
So the usual minimum work requirement type of conversation around the last event.
Yeah. Okay. But this time, Chase announcing, for the final time, Tia Claire Toomey's fittest. Maybe he makes the retirement announcement.
Oh, wow. Don't retire anybody too soon. That's the only thing I learned.
This is, I've mentioned this before, but I talked to Tia. Last time I talked to her in person was 3 months before she gave birth, and she was already convincing me that 2024 CrossFit Games are going to be something you don't want to miss. And meaning that she's going to be coming back with a fervor and a fire to reclaim her title from whoever took it from her when she wasn't out there competing. And there's nothing that she's done up to this point that makes me doubt that fact. And I think she's going to lay waste to this competition. I think Laura is going to be solidly in second. I think it's going to be a really, really compelling fight, 3 through 10.
I agree with just one of those points.
Well, and PC, this is where I was wondering if you were going to go, is we only know 4 events. a lot of people do put a discount on Laura if a certain movement or certain event comes up. Is that where you feel maybe one of the other 8 events is, we didn't do it last year, here comes the movement she's always struggled with, and that's going to be maybe the difference?
I think it's going to be one of those things where you're probably going to see maybe some type of handstand push-up workout where she might have a bottom finish. I don't, if it's strict, then she'll probably get the bottom finish. But then you'll see another workout where it would be some type of sandbag lunge where she'll win. But those can't.
Right, yeah, and as Brian said, she can take a hit and still win by 50 points.
Whereas I think Gabby doesn't have a hit. I don't think Gabby's weak.
That's where you're going. Yep.
That's where I'm going. I think Gabby's holes are very, very less. I mean, she, again, and I put it to the whole point. She's training every day, every single hour with them. I mean, she's learning from the best, and there's only one age difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And
Dude,
Gabby,
there were 12 workouts at the games last year. Laura won 5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Even if Tia takes 2 or 3 of those event wins away from her, she's still having 5 or 6 top 2 finishes. That's almost half the events. Like, it's just, you can afford to have a bad workout if you're having 6 top 2 finishes.
Yeah.
And the rest of the women, like you talk about, like, oh, I think Gabby might get her on the mile run. I think she might get her on the run swim. Laura's not going to do badly on either of those workouts, and she might win the total and Chad. Of the 4 workouts we know, she's already has a potential to win 2 of them. I don't know. I think she's really, really hard to beat.
Yeah. Love you, Brian, but it's a year. It's
going to make it exciting.
Megala 2024. I'm on her ticket.
Wow, look at this. Yeah. Is there any other athletes on the top 20 here you guys want to shout out?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I wanted to ask Brian about Karin Freyova. I mean, that's been you were one of the earliest people, like, being a proponent of her. This year you have her at 12th. It's very similar of where she's been the last couple of years. I mean, do you think this year's games that is there a possibility she jumps in that top 10? And if so, what does she need to, what events does she need to become a top 10 athlete?
Yeah, a past version of me would have picked her inside the top 10 here, but I just have to respect the athletes ahead of here. All of these athletes have proven to be better than her at the competitions that matter the most. Emma got her at the semifinal. She got her at the games last year. We haven't talked much about Emma except for the one person in the comments who's a huge fan of hers and was listing off a long list of things that they love about Emma. But I mean, I'm waiting for Karin Frey to have a breakthrough performance at the games where she's competing with these women. If you look at her history in Dubai, she has beaten Sam Briggs, Gabby Mikawa, Jamie Green. She's beaten Matilda Garnes, Emily Rolfe, Jamie Simmons, Andrea Solberg, Claudia Gluck. None of those are top 10 athletes at the games, really, except, they weren't at the time that she was beating them. So she's beating athletes that are 10th to 20th, 10th to 25th range at the games. And until she shows me that at a semifinal or at the games that she can beat the athletes that we're expecting to be in the top 10, I can't put her in the top 10. Conversely to that, she's really, really good at finishing 12th through 15th. And we've obviously lost. We've lost a few athletes, gained a few athletes. And so I think that her likely place to finish is kind of right where it's always been.
I got one more for you. You both ranked her the same. She trains in her garage, Arielle Loewen. What makes you, the athletes that you seemingly jump ahead of her were all there last year. What do you see in maybe those athletes? And again, your answer can be, hey, 4th through 10th or 3rd through 10th is really a crapshoot. But obviously you both put her there. You both put athletes that were competed right against her ahead of her. What do you think that looks like?
Well, I don't think that Arielle Loewen has gotten any worse from last year. But I do think that it's worth noting what she has said about last year was that, that was a perfect year for me. That was, she said to Dave, I don't know how it gets any better. He goes, well, there's 2 more spots. She's probably thinking, yeah, do you know who those 2 spots are? It's not Gabby McGowan.
Oh.
I don't even know if PC's here anymore. Thought I'd get a reaction from him.
Look, she's a realist. And that's what I love about her. I think that's what a lot of people love about her, that she speaks her mind, a realist. She just, she doesn't have these, I mean, she appreciates everything that she's given, and she appreciates everything the sport has given her. It's given her a life that she never imagined before, when she was a fringe, semifinalist, missing out on the games, athlete. I'm sorry, a regional type athlete. But, but yeah, I mean, I think 7, we can easily say it's a crapshoot between all these athletes, but I think last year it was just a perfect thing. She just ended up her way. She did everything she needed to do to be on the podium, where some of those athletes, like Alex Kazan, Alexis Raptis, they kind of faltered, where Arielle just stayed steady, and Arielle's steady. And I think this is one of those. This is with Tia and Laura in this field, this top heavy field. You can't just be steady. You got to be exceptional at things. And I don't know if Arielle, outside of maybe a handstand walk event, is exceptional than some of these other athletes. And some of these.
I mean, she had 5 top 4 finishes last year at the games. Mm-hmm. They weren't necessarily on workouts that you would have picked her to have those finishes on in all cases either. Like intervals, I wouldn't have known that she would have had a top 3 finish on intervals. Okay, maybe on the or even the 5K run, I wouldn't have picked her to have a top 3 finish there. Pig Chipper, I wouldn't have picked her for that. She's Helena, like, they weren't handstand specific workouts. Inverted medley, she got 14th. It was one of her worst finishes. She was phenomenal, like exceptional. She had the most consistent performance. She won by almost 100 points over Gabby. She was only 30 points behind, maybe closer to 40 points behind Lawson. This is like, I didn't feel good putting Arielle Loewen at 7th place.
I know.
But it's one of, but I do think that Gazan and Raptis have improved this year. I think that Magawa and Lawson I think Lawson is still a notch ahead of this group. And I think Magawa has pushed forward. And, I don't like to make too many crazy picks, but I did feel like this was a kind of a slight against Loewen, putting her at 7. But I'm also not, even Jay Crouch last year, he finished 8th, and still after 1 8th place finish in the worldwide rankings, I had him 17th. He didn't like that. Then he backed it up with the top 10 at Rogue, and I was willing to give him a little bit more credit. Okay, now you've done it twice against this, caliber of competition. And Arielle has been pretty consistent at all the competitions she shows up to, and good performances at podium finishes at Wodapalooza, or did she miss by 1 spot there? But like we said, that was kind of a weird one. Anyway, so I think it's a good call. I'm glad you called it out. I didn't feel great about having her there at 7, but I do think we'll see a little bit of a regression last year towards probably where she is worldwide on the fitness scale, which is in this kind of 5, 6, 7 range, and not 3rd best in the world.
Mm.
And it's also 1 spot. It's like, it's not like we dropped her 4 spots. We're really only dropping her 3 spots because Tia slides back in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Brian?
These are interesting comments. I mean, about the programming differences between, Nadine thinks Arielle will be better at Dave's program. Actually, I mean, Arielle will be better relative to Gazan. Another, it's all the same person. So, that is something that we kind of have to wait and see on that regard. There are elements of Boz's programming that I think stand out, but when you look at the whole test of what he put together during the years that he was in charge of that, it's not crazy programming, and it's not crazy different. So let's see how all of the tests look before maybe addressing that. It's obviously a relevant question, but I don't know how relevant it is to the leaderboard yet.
Yeah, and Arielle's, I mean, to my extent, I think she's the perfect example of what we were talking about on the previous page, of an athlete where everything to gain, nothing to lose, just put her head down and do the work sort of athlete. So with that, if there's pressure on some of these athletes to perform, I don't necessarily see that with Arielle. I mean, the big story about her years ago was she just wanted a placard. So all there to gain if she just does the work. And if what Dave has sort of led us to believe is that this is a lot more back to basics. You have to do the work, grunt work sort of season.
Grunt work, but also intensity. Don't forget the core. One of the core principles of the methodology is intensity. Once you have the mechanics and consistency locked in, And it was pretty obvious in his conversations with the athletes that he thinks a lot of them are training way more than they need to. And he was pretty impressed with the volume and intensity with which Arielle trains. Basically trains for 2 hours and then 30 minutes again in the evening is what she said. I also think that she has an advantage against almost everyone in the field of being resistant to performance bias when it comes to emotion. Like good or bad, she just shows up and competes again. She is an athlete that's really good at fighting for those points, regardless of the situation, whether it's a fight for 5th, 10th, 15th, 20th, whatever. And for all those reasons, it was difficult for me to put her here, but I feel bad. I feel like this is likely where she's going to finish. I feel like I might be giving a little credit to Raptis and Gazan, and I'm hoping that they can, prove me right in that regard. But I think this is going to be a fun top 10 to watch. And by Sunday, I expect all, 9 or 10 of the women that I have in the top 10 to be there in the top 10 and have that chance to look left and right and know, okay, those are the two that I need to beat right now if I want to finish 1 or 2 spots higher. And they all want to finish 1 or 2 spots higher. We'll get to the men on Thursday, but Dallin Pepper climbed from like 11th to 5th or something in the final day, and finishing 5th at the games last year changed his life this year in terms of the opportunities that opened up for him, as opposed to if he took the 11th, no one would be talking about it the same way. He wouldn't have got the same sponsorship opportunities. So those are big, big positions on a leaderboard, and there's a lot for these athletes to fight for there.
Anything you want to close out saying, Halpin?
No, excited for what this looks like. Again, I'm not the guy to put out rankings, so I appreciate you two being able to come on and defend these. I think it'll be interesting where things fall out. I do have a couple articles and things coming out, Known and Knowable, as it says there. Love the follow, love what's going on, and I'm happy to see. Well, PC, I don't know that we'll make it meet in the middle here. You might be out of town before I get there, but good to see you, Brian, next week. Good to see you.
Some housekeeping, obviously homegrown relief. Again, if you follow them on Instagram, get a chance to win $50 store credit. Shout out to Carl and the HDR people working on possibly, maybe I'm going to talk to them, but maybe doing some HDR giveaways during the games or something like that. Find Brian and get a relief stick or something like that. But another thing, there's a couple questions here that people were asking, and let me bring it up here. Oops, sorry. Comments. There we go. One SPM? Thanks for the 10 pounds. That's a pound, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 10 pounds or euros or whatever. I mean, I need to start. I need to learn that conversion rate, anyways, since I'll be heading off to Germany. Yeah, that's
there you go.
A Scottish money.
Yeah.
And a couple people asked us, what's B.Friendly crew doing at the games this year? Well, I won't be there, but Brian will be there.
I can handle that.
Yeah, you take care of that. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, Patrick will be in Europe. We'll be really sad not to have him there. Chad and I will be there. Chad Mueller and I, and we'll be walking around, talking to people, athletes, coaches, whatever, getting some quick reactions to events that are happening, and then also planning some content to release later about the experience at the CrossFit Games from our perspective. We have a few content creators that have been part of our team in the past that'll be there. Marius, Truth Films, David, Training Day Media, will be supporting us with creating some cool stuff. They're excellent in their own disciplines, but we also give them a lot of freedom to kind of shoot what they want, do what they want. So we'll just be kind of celebrating the competition, the athletes through their creative minds, primarily through Instagram. We'll do event-specific reactions throughout the day. Probably not going to do too much podcasting. There's a lot of people that are doing podcasts. I think Tyler and John and Spin will be doing the morning and night from, I'm not sure exactly, in the
kind of like from the Vendor Village
area.
Yeah,
and then
it's gonna be cool.
And then I think JR and Taylor are doing event recaps after the fact in a podcast form. So we probably won't do too much on the podcast front, but we'll have that immediate. Most of our stuff will be on Instagram, and so you can follow along there.
Yeah, Mike, what do you got?
My good friend Sebastian and I will be down there starting on Tuesday next week. We have a lot of plans. We'll see what it all looks like. But but yeah, we're excited for it. It's the first year out on our own. We were with you all last year, so we do appreciate the collaboration for sure. I'm sure we'll be hanging out and doing a lot of things together. Not too much podcasts for us either. Looking to do a lot of event breakdowns, athlete interviews. I'll be writing articles as well. So yeah, making the most of it. But yeah, excited for the first year in Fort Worth. Maybe not excited for the heat, although I think that topic's getting a little bit old. But we'll find out how it feels down there.
The most likely scenario for the morning event on Thursday morning and the evening event on Friday evening is going to be 80 to 85 degrees. That's probably the like expected temperature during those times. And that's not crazy. There have been plenty of workouts that have been done at 80 to 85 degrees during the Carson era and the Madison era in some years.
Well, I'm not worried about the athletes. I'm worried about myself. So
you're screwed, Mike.
Mike,
I'll be sweating more than they are. And my heart will be going faster than theirs while they're doing the event, and I'm just standing on the sidelines. So,
Mike, you're in a lot better shape than I am. So, I started running last week.
Yeah.
And I'm just 2 hours south of Dallas Fort Worth. I'm just outside of Austin. And the heat here is unbearable. Like in the mornings, walking to the chow hall, which is like 100 feet away, I'm already drenched in sweat. If you saw me earlier, you could see all the sweat just from walking from one building to another. It's hot. It's the humidity. It hits pretty early. It stays that way. But I don't know. I know like Sahar, Moritz, there's a Gemma Raider, a bunch of athletes are either here or they're coming in. Getting acclimated. I know like Moritz, or they already hit the water. They already hit the actual lake that they're going to swim in. They already tried that out, looking for alligators or crocodiles or whatever. I think the heat's, at the end of the day, you have high school Texas kids doing 3-a-day football practices right now. So you can't tell me that the fittest can't deal with a little bit of heat, which they, so when athletes start complaining about that, I kind of just roll my eyes because, I'm driving my football fields and watching high school kids, going through the third practice day in full pads. So
a lot of love for this B.Friendly hug booth idea.
Wow. I'll be selling
you don't need a booth. Just find me and ask for a hug. I'll give you a hug.
Yeah, exactly.
Pay me and then you can hug Brian. I'll hold the door for you, Brian.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Appreciate the support. Yeah, is that Kevin at High Rocks?
There we go. I like it.
Anyway, this is the first of 3 that we're going to do this week. We're going to do the teams tomorrow. It'll be a little bit of a shorter show. We'll rank all 30 teams, talk about that competition, which we don't have as much information about as individuals. And then we're going to save the men for Thursday. I'm just going to tell you guys now, the men's field at the CrossFit Games this year is lethal. It is stacked. And there are guys that I have picked in the bottom 10 that I feel bad putting them in the bottom 10, but there's just not enough spaces. And that's how difficult it's going to be. So that'll be on Thursday. I think that'll be probably the most fun one. There's a pretty clear group of 10 or 12 women at the top of the women's field. Whereas the men's field, I think, when you're looking at 10 through 12 there, you might be looking at 10 to 12 guys that could potentially be finishing those 3 spots. So that should be pretty fun on Thursday and wrap up our kind of games preview series this week.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So appreciate it, guys. Mike, thanks for coming on. We'll see you tomorrow. Again, like Brian said, we'll preview the teams tomorrow. And I'll have my selections. If you like this format where me and Brian are kind of, he's going at blind. He doesn't see my picks. I've been able to see his picks, but I haven't been able to study them. And then Mike was looking down and just asking us all the hard question. And like J.O. said, subscribe if you haven't. Really appreciate the help. A lot of cool stuff on the horizon. Games are less than 10 days away, man. I'm jealous of this. I'm jealous for you guys. I'm jealous of everyone for this cool coverage you're going to see coming out of this game. So with that being said, thank you HGR CBD for the support as possible. Make sure you scan that QR code for a chance to win $50 store credit. And as always, be friendly, our friend.